Three female scientists, long forgotten, made crucial contributions to the war effort during World War II. Stay tuned to meet them. Hello, I'm Linda Shenton-Matchett, author, speaker, and history geek. While researching my stories, I unearthed tons of intriguing historical information that doesn't end up in my books. So I've created this channel to share those tidbits with you. The first woman to be hired as a scientist for the General Electric Laboratory in Schenectady, New York, Katharine Burr Blodgett, was a physicist and a chemist. Her early life was marked by the tragic death of her father, who was killed by a burglar shortly before she was born. A patent attorney, he worked for GE, and the company offered a $5,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of the culprit. By all reports, the man thought to be responsible was caught, but managed to hang himself in his cell before the trial. Anxious to leave the terrible memories behind, Katharine's mother moved the family to New York City after Katharine was born in January of 1898. 3 years later, they relocated to France for a time, then returned to New York for a year before going back to Europe, this time to Germany. Finally, in 1912, the family came home to New York and Katharine entered school. She excelled in the sciences, and when the time came to enter college, she was accepted into the prestigious Bryn Mawr College. After graduation, Irving Langmuir, a colleague of her father's at GE, took her on a tour of the plant, then promised her a research position if she would pursue her master's. She immediately enrolled in the program at University of Chicago, where she researched ways to improve the gas mask, imperative with the world embroiled in the Great War. Referred to by one source as a chemist's war, partly because of the harmful or incapacitating lethal gases, such as tear gases, chlorine, phosgene, dioxazine, and mustard gas, that were deployed on the battlefield. She graduated the following year and joined GE. Working side by side with Langmuir, they dug deeper into the technique he had developed for creating single molecule thin films on the surface of water. Defined by Merriam-Webster, a molecule is the smallest particle of a substance that retains all the properties and is composed of one or more atoms. Katharine and Langmuir researched ways to use similar techniques with lipids, polymers, and proteins to cover surfaces of water, metal, or glass, and successfully created monomolecular coatings that were only a few nanometers thick, a nanometer being 1/1000th of a meter. With an eye toward advancing within GE, Katharine decided to obtain her doctorate and enrolled in Newnham College, part of Cambridge. She received her PhD in physics in 1926, becoming the first woman to be awarded this degree by Cambridge University. Returning to GE, Katharine extended Langmuir's work and eventually invented a coating that is non-reflective or anti-reflective, creating what is known as invisible glass. This coating was used on camera lenses, and Gone with the Wind was the very first major color film projected through a lens with coating based on her work. The crystal clear cinematography astounded the 1939 audiences. Other projects included various improvements to the incandescent light bulb and the invention of a color gauge, a way to measure the thickness of molecular coatings on glass. Her studies with Langmuir on electrical discharges in gases particularly laid the foundation for plasma physics. In addition to receiving 8 patents, 6 of which were hers alone, she published more than 30 technical papers in multiple scientific journals. During World War II, her glass work was used on airplane spy cameras and submarine periscopes. Her research on the properties of charcoal led to more effective gas masks and smoke screens. She also invented a technique for de-icing airplane wings, which allowed pilots to fly in conditions previously thought too dangerous. Today's non-reflective gas is based on Blodgett's discovery and used in computer screens, eyeglasses, windshields, and just about everything that requires a perfectly transparent surface. Yet her name is long forgotten. Our second scientist, Maria Goeppert-Mayer, was born in Katowice, Germany, which is now Katowice, Poland, in June of 1906. Her father, a pediatrician, was appointed professor of pediatrics at the University of Göttingen, becoming a sixth-generation university professor. Maria would later become a seventh-generation professor when she took a position at Sarah Lawrence College. A bright student, Maria studied math at Göttingen before transferring to Cambridge the following year. She returned to Germany, where she graduated. Interested in physics, she decided to pursue a PhD and wrote her thesis on a theory about two-photon absorption by atoms. It would be 30 years before the invention of laser would prove her theory. She defended that thesis in front of 3 future Nobel Prize winners, one of whom was responsible for introducing her to her future husband, American Joseph Edward Mayer. The two fell in love, and in 1930, after marrying, moved to the United States, where her husband became a professor at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. According to more than one source, this was the time of the Depression, and no college or university would think about employing the wife of a professor. So Maria was unable to get hired. However, she continued to conduct research and study physics. 7 years later, Joe was fired and found a job at Columbia University, where Maria took another unpaid position. In 1941, she was finally offered a paying position, part-time professor of science at Sarah Lawrence College. The following year, after the U.S. entered the war, she was hired on the Opacity Project, a program intent on developing thermonuclear weapons. She researched properties of matter and radiation at extremely high temperatures, then moved on to studying isotope separation for the Manhattan Project, part of the efforts to separate uranium-235 from natural uranium. According to several sources, Joe was sent to the Pacific Theater in February of 1945. However, I was unable to unearth what he actually did. It seems unlikely that he was drafted into the military because he returned less than 6 months later. While he was gone, Maria left the children in New York and traveled to Los Alamos to be part of the research team. The war finally ended, and Joe and Maria found professorships at University of Chicago, where they remained until 1960, at which time they then moved to San Diego, California, where Joe became professor of chemistry and Maria professor of physics. In 1963, Maria became the second woman to win the Nobel Prize in Physics, the first being Marie Curie. Maria shared the award with Hans Jensen and Eugene Wigner for their discoveries concerning nuclear shell structure. She died of a heart attack in February 20th, 1972. 14 years later, the American Physical Society created the Maria Goeppert-Mayer Award in recognition of outstanding contribution to physics research by women. Joan Struthers-Curran is our third and final scientist, another physicist. Born February 26, 1916, in Swansea, Wales, like Katharine Blodgett, Joan was accepted at Newnham College, where she received her bachelor's degree in physics, then went to the university's Cavendish Laboratory to obtain her doctorate. She was paired with Samuel Curran, and they became fast friends. 2 years later, when the war commenced, they were transferred to Exeter, where they worked on military research projects such as developing proximity fuses to destroy enemy aircraft and rockets, Britain did not have the capacity to mass produce these fuses. So in late 1940, the design was sent to the US, where it was perfected and manufactured, then shipped back to England, where it was used in defense of the V-1 flying bomb. About that same time, Joan and Sam were married, and shortly thereafter, they were transferred to the Telecommunication Research Establishment, where Sam worked on concentric radar, and Joan was assigned to a project led by British physicist and military intelligence expert R.V. Jones. She was tasked with developing a method to hide aircraft from radar detection. Based on the fact that reflective materials can fool radar, Joan began to experiment with various shapes and sizes of metal strips, from singular wires to sheets the size of notebook paper. After months of study, she finally settled on reflectors made from aluminum that were about 25 centimeters long to 1.5 centimeters wide, which is slightly less than 9 inches long and about 3/4 of an inch wide. Bundled into 1-pound packets, they were tossed out of the lead aircraft once each minute. This simple process produced the radar equivalent of a smoke screen. The idea was tested in July of 1943 during Operation Gomorrah, a bombing raid on Hamburg, Germany, and was considered highly successful, with the loss of only 12 Allied aircraft out of the 791 that precipitated in the raid. Known as chaff, the strips were used again as part of the diversion tactics on June the 5th, 1944, to prevent German troops from knowing where the Allied invasion would begin. R.V. Jones would later comment that, quote, "In my opinion, Joan Coran made an even greater contribution to victory than Sam," unquote. The Curans were selected to be part of a team of scientists sent to America to work on the Manhattan Project, where she also worked on the project to separate uranium-235 from natural uranium. There's no indication that Maria Goeppert and Joan met, but I'd like to think they did, as they had much in common. After the war, she focused on raising her children in Glasgow, where Sam had taken a job as professor of natural philosophy. She passed away from cancer on February 10, 1999, just shy of a year after Sam. In her obituary, she was touted as having, quote, "the scientific equivalent of gardening green fingers." If you'd like to learn more about the inventions and objects crucial to World War II, grab my book, The World War II Homefront in 29 Objects. Available in paperback and ebook, ordering information can be found in the details below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.